Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I see so many of you are already here live. I want to say hello to some of you. Let's see: Grace, Joanne, Laura, Fahad, Lori, Antonetta, Irene, Nicole, Montana, Teresa. Wonderful having you here. If you're just joining, say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from today. We have Antonietta in New Jersey. Fahad is in Pakistan. Teresa, Las Vegas. Hey, Amber in Florida. Great to have you. Okay, so I want to welcome you to today's live session where we are talking about a topic that I think many of you can relate to, and that is overthinking. We're talking about how to stop overthinking everything. So, if you are joining live, again, say hello in the chat. We always love to hear where you're watching from. Let's see, Prachi in Ottawa, Jessica, hello in Troy, Caleb in Raleigh, Grace in North Carolina. Excellent. Great to have you all here. So if you're joining live, say hello in the chat. If you're catching this on replay, save replay. And as we're going along today in this conversation, please share what is resonating with you, what is standing out for you, what questions you have. We want this to be a discussion. And that's one of the benefits of being live here. So today we are talking about and we're diving into what overthinking is, how it manifests at work, and the impact it has on sensitive strivers. You've probably heard me talk about that term before, especially if you've tuned into any of my lives or been following my content at all. And being a sensitive striver refers to being a high achiever who thinks and feels everything more deeply, which for better or worse, makes overthinking much more likely. So we'll be talking about this and we'll be sharing some of our favorite tips for breaking free from this cycle. I want to introduce myself. I am one of your hosts for today, Melody Wilding. I am an executive coach, licensed social worker. I'm the author of a book called Trust Yourself, which some of you may be here because you have read in the past. And if so, let us know in the comments. I always love hearing from readers and knowing how you found the book, how you came across it. I'm also the creator of a program called Resilient, which is a 3-month group coaching program that helps sensitive strivers regain their confidence, master their emotions, and turn their sensitivity into a strength and an asset. And what's really, really exciting is that Resilience starts this Thursday. So we're about 48 hours from kicking off the final round for 2023. And even more importantly, enrollment for this round closes today, closes at 11:59 Eastern. So if you are on the fence, if you're at all interested in learning about the program, there's a QR code here on the screen. You can take out your phone, go to your camera app, and it will bring you a link to that page. Or you can head to melodywilding.com/resilient. But remember, you'll want to hurry. You'll want to do that soon because enrollment closes tonight. And speaking of resilient, you can see that today I am not alone. I am joined by my co-coach in the program, Wendy Carey. And what's really special about Wendy is she is not only a certified professional coach, she is not only a sensitive striver herself, she is also a graduate of Resilient. So I really couldn't think of anyone better to partner with me in this program to help our clients get out of their own way and stop overthinking. And someone to join me in this conversation today as we talk about navigating this topic. So, Wendy, hello, welcome. Tell us and our viewers here a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, thanks, Melody. I really appreciate that wonderful introduction. I'm an executive well-being coach, and I'm a seasoned professional with a background in IT leadership. I bring a unique blend of technical expertise and a passion for helping leaders break free from burnout and achieve their professional goals. I started on the journey of being a coach about 3 years ago, and it's been Boy, a really cool adventure, and really, really excited when last year you reached out to me about coaching on resilient. And that's just, the feather in the cap. It's such an honor to be coaching sensitive strivers. I relate so much to them. When I um, when I was in Resilient, your inaugural event, I finally felt like I had a home. I always felt like the odd one out. And just joining Resilient, I found that there are there are other people like me, and yeah, it's like coming home. So thank you for that experience as well, Melody.
Yeah, yeah, and I that means a lot to hear. And we work really, really hard to make sure it's a place where sensitive strivers feel supported. They feel like there's psychological safety, and I think it is so unique because so many of us have never had people in our lives who get us, who understand what it's like to deeply process everything. And that's a really unique experience to not only have those connections but also be in a space where you can talk about how these traits show up at work.
Right.
So speaking of which, let's get into our topic today, which is overthinking. And I would love to know from your perspective, how do you define overthinking?
At its core, for me, overthinking is dwelling or worrying about the same thing repeatedly. And with overthinking, you're giving something more thought than is necessary in order to make a good enough decision, especially when your thoughts are negative and you're worried or anxious.
Yeah.
So, what's your definition of overthinking, Melanie? Do you have
Well,
anything to add to that?
it's very similar to yours. And, I like to say it's not necessarily about the quantity of your thinking, but it's about the quality of your
Mm,
thinking. And I think your response pointed to that it's these unhelpful cycles. It's when you think not only too long, too much, but in unhelpful ways where you keep hitting mental dead ends.
right.
And it tends to be characterized by this negativity, whether it's negative self talk, it's a sense of pessimism or worry. And that's different than deep thought, which, when we are more balanced as sensitive strivers, we're able to access that reflectiveness to think deeply, strategically, to make unique connections. But the key difference is that's moving us forward. That's productive. It's constructive. It feels better
Mhm.
than overthinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now that we know what overthinking is, how do you see overthinking arise for sensitive strivers?
Yeah. And Wendy, I want to hear your perspective on this too, because there's so many ways. And what's interesting is that in this, the folks who are enrolling in this round of Resilient, I would say the number one thing everyone is struggling with is overthinking in some capacity or another, whether it's constantly replaying situations that have happened at work or conversations that they had or didn't have. A
Mm,
big one is this inability to disconnect from work after hours, feeling like you have trouble turning off your brain at the end of the day and you just keep thinking, processing, ruminating about situations. I actually talked to someone this morning who said, I overthink what I want to say and I overanalyze what I should say in a meeting to the point where I then don't say anything at all. I psych myself out and I end up saying nothing. And I would
mhm.
love to know, actually, for those of you who are here live, how do you see overthinking come up the most for you at work? I mean, I'm mentioning some things that we see in Resilient very often, but I would love to hear from those of you who are here in the chat. What else do you experience? So I mentioned a few: replaying scenarios, feeling consumed by work after hours. Perfectionism is another big one where you are so self critical that you are second guessing and always worrying about not meeting expectations. And another unique one, I think, for us sensitive strivers is that we're able to see so many sides of a situation. We're able to consider so many different angles or people's viewpoints. Again, can be a strength in the right context, but that often makes it very hard to be decisive, to have conviction about a situation because we can see all the possibilities. So, Wendy, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, and kind of building on that, just the feeling of not being able to shut off your brain. So whether it's about work or about home, your brain is just constantly going with all of these thoughts, usually with worry and anxiety attached to them. So yeah, not being able to shut off your brain, and then feeling paralyzed by those thoughts that are coming up. So a lot of fear that can come along with that. And then a really classic one, overworking. When you're thinking about work constantly, you often, you can't think of a way to say no to additional responsibilities. And you keep working on and on after hours and for way too much time. So that's another thing that I see coming up.
Yeah, such a great point that you can either retreat and not do anything at all, or you can overcompensate and go too far. Yeah,
Right.
I want to read some of the responses that are coming in here. So Joanne was saying, worrying and wondering about what people are thinking of me and my actions. We had another LinkedIn user. I'm sorry, I can't see your name, but they said worrying about speaking up or responding to someone. Lori said something similar, spending a lot of time thinking about how other people don't respond the way I believe they should have. Amber, completely overthink when writing a quick chat or email to my boss, coworkers, afraid someone will take it the wrong way. Oh, yes, I can relate. And Caleb also said rewriting an email multiple times because you're not sure of how you're coming across. Yeah, there's so much around worrying about other people's perceptions of us.
Yeah.
And I think this happens a lot for us sensitive strivers because we often we often attach our self-worth to how other people see us. So if other people think we're nice, think we're good, think we're working hard, then we feel good about ourselves. But if we're uncertain about where we stand with other people, or we think they hate us, they're mad at us, we upset them, that's unbearable for us. Wendy, anything you want to add to that?
Um, no, I don't think I mean, you covered a lot. So,
Well, I would actually love to know from you. I mean, clearly everyone here is relating to this topic. Why do you think sensitive strivers are more prone to overthinking? Why do you think this is such a big challenge we see?
yeah. So, sensitive strivers are highly attuned to their emotions, their environment, and the behavior of others. And because their awareness of these things is so strong, it can be difficult to remain solution focused and easy to overthink. Being solution focused is really being able to move forward and focus on the facts in front of you instead of thinking about what others might think, what emotions you're going through at the time, whether you're hot or cold, things like that. So that's very important. They're also prone to emotional overwhelm and therefore have a heightened stress response.
Mm.
So with a heightened stress response, you feel more fear and again get paralyzed when you aren't able to move forward. And then finally, and this is a tricky one. Sometimes sensitive strivers feel demoralized by the high expectations that they place on themselves. And this leads to overthinking and in even minor situations.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, again, what I really want to drive home for people is that everything we're talking about, when you're able to use these qualities in balance, whether it's your ability to think deeply, your sense of responsibility and obligation and dedication to your work or to others, your drive to be excellent and do good work, all of those things can be tremendous positives. But any strength, when it's taken to an extreme, can get in our way, can become a hindrance. So that's what we're all about, and that's so much of what we focus on inside of Resilient is how do we help you capitalize on the upsides of all that your sensitivity has to offer while mitigating some of the downsides or the ways it might be tripping you up right now.
Yeah, that's a really helpful part of Resilient.
Yeah.
So many little coaching sessions that we do with the participants can really talk through different techniques for overcoming overthinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's important to understand the types of overthinking that there are. So, what are the 3 types of overthinking, Melody?
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to put this in context with this is important to recognize, because if we just say, well, I'm overthinking, the more you can label something and understand it, the better you can control and change it. So that's why we want to share this with you today. So, yes, there's in general 3 types of overthinking. The first of those is rumination. So think about that as worrying about the past. That is when you are going back over a conversation in your head 500 times. You keep kicking yourself for that mistake you made last week or a month or a year ago. You worry about how someone might have judged you. So, rumination is all about worrying about, fretting about the past. Then we have analysis paralysis. So, some of you were mentioning finding it hard to make decisions or to move forward because you feel stuck, not being able to reach a conclusion, Fahad said. That's a great example of analysis paralysis, where we are considering so many different options, possible outcomes, that we can't arrive at a path for action. And again, this comes from our detail orientation, our very conscientious nature. But when it comes to complex choices that often don't have a straightforward answer, we can get stuck and we can weigh those pros and cons and just go around in circles and circles and circles. So, rumination, analysis paralysis. And then the last one is future tripping. So, if rumination is being stuck in the past, analysis paralysis is having trouble making a decision in the present. Future tripping is about worrying about things that have yet to come, imagining what ifs and worst case scenarios, and instead of having excitement for the future and always just being in that constant state of anticipation and worry. So I would love to know from those of you who are here, which of those 3 types of overthinking do you relate to the most? Rumination, analysis paralysis, or future tripping? Go ahead and type in the chat. And Wendy, we actually have a question here, and I would love your perspective on this. Caleb asked, are there trends noticed with sensitive strivers and overthinking and ADHD having more challenges with these sort of issues? So I think what Caleb is asking is, are there trends with sensitive strivers who have ADHD having more challenges with these issues? That's how I'm reading the question. Wendy, do you have any thoughts on that? I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah, with my thoughts on that are ADHD, you typically have some issues with executive functioning. And executive functioning plays into your overthinking. It's those places where overthinking typically happens. Trying to make a decision, trying to get a specific task done and focus on it. Your thoughts keep jumping around from place to place. So being a sensitive striver and ADHD can definitely exacerbate those issues because of that.
Yeah, Absolutely. Yeah. And, to be fully honest, the research is still developing around the relationship between high sensitivity and ADHD. We're only beginning to still understand this. So I don't want to misspeak because the research is still really evolving on this. But yes, I mean, in my lived experience, having done this work for 11 years now, yes, we do often find that a fair number of sensitive strivers, definitely not all. This is not, high sensitivity and ADHD are not exactly the same thing, but they of course overlap because high sensitivity is a normal aspect of being human. It just denotes how responsive is your nervous system. And so you have some people that are on the lower end of responsiveness in terms of their nervous system, and others that are on the higher end. It's just a naturally occurring spectrum. And then, of course, ADHD can overlap with that. So, yes, in my experience, we do see sensitive strivers that have ADHD definitely struggle with overthinking as well. So, Wendy, speaking of which, we've touched on a bit about how sensitive strivers are deep processors, very reflective. How do you think about distinguishing thoughtful analysis and thoughtful reflection from unproductive, unhelpful overthinking?
Yeah. So the way I approach this is that if you're doing analysis and you keep researching because you need to be able to address all concerns, that's unproductive, all or nothing thinking. But if you feel like you've addressed the majority or likely concerns and then stop, that's into the thoughtful analysis. And a few questions that you can ask yourself to make sure that you're staying within thoughtful analysis are Are you worrying or responding to your anxieties? Are you fixated on perfection? Or are negative thoughts driving you? And if you've determined that you're overthinking based on your answers to those questions, then it's time to manage your thoughtfulness.
Mhm. I love that.
So, yeah.
I love that question. What was the one about reacting to your anxiety? What was that?
Are you worrying or responding to your anxieties?
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. And in the program we end up talking a lot about separating what is your fear talking versus what is your intuition
Right.
telling you. And I think a lot of times intuition gets a very bad rap as something that's very woo woo and mystical. When in actuality, it's just what is your gut sense? What is your judgment of this situation before you start layering on what are people going to think? What's the right answer here? Before we start layering on all of those judgments. So, yeah, excellent. I love it. Excellent, excellent questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, we've talked some about how sensitive strivers, how overthinking manifests for them. How can they manage their thoughtfulness more effectively?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to piggyback on something you were just sharing around, are you trying to focus on solving everything? And you had a question in there of, are you trying to perfect and solve for everything, which can lead to that analysis paralysis when you're trying to juggle too many variables, you're trying to please too many people. And so, one really effective way to think about shortcutting overthinking, particularly when you're trying to make decisions, is satisficing. So, that's a combination between satisfying and sufficing. So, it basically means how can you find the good enough solution? Not the perfect solution, but the good enough solution. The one that satisfies enough key variables that you want to focus on and is good enough for you to move ahead with. So that's the first thing I would say is adopting more of an approach of satisficing. Second is externalizing your thoughts because as sensitive strivers, we got a lot going on inside to begin with. And all of that all of that takes up very valuable cognitive resources. So every thought you're keeping in your brain, every decision you're turning over in your head over and over and over is literally using up energy. It's using up glucose in your brain. So when you externalize your thoughts, when you get them out of your head, whether that's onto paper, whether you have a voice note on your phone, you brain dump to-dos or concerns into a doc, you have a coach or a community to support you. When you externalize your thoughts, you are freeing up mental space. And all of that means you have more bandwidth to work with to make better decisions. And when you externalize, you see a situation more objectively. I can't tell you, Wendy, maybe you've had this experience in your own coaching, but how many times I feel like I am stuck on something and I am just spinning my wheels. And then I have one coaching conversation and I feel like everything is now clear. I feel like how was I overcomplicating that when the answer and the path forward was so simple? And that's the power of support too, is just having that gut check and that person to help you organize and sort through your thinking around you.
Right. Or
Yeah.
even the thought of, I've grown up thinking this way and it's always been that way. And here's a completely new thought, new way to process things that I never even considered. And
Mm.
that automatically stops the overthinking because there's just this new perspective.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, it jolts you out. It helps you see different possibilities. Again, rather than going in those mental circles and dead ends. I
Yeah.
love that. And the last thing I want to mention before Wendy, I ask for your thoughts on this question. You said all the phrase all or nothing thinking, and we see that come up all the time in Resilient, where it's this very extremist thinking. So you may not literally be thinking or saying this to yourself, but it's the idea that if I don't get this right, I'm a complete failure. It's this very either or, again, all or nothing. And it comes up all the time where we may only see two options in a situation. We may only see the first one that comes to mind is, well, I have to either give my boss this really difficult feedback or I need to quit. And those are the only two options. And what we really end up focusing on a lot in the program is helping people find the middle ground, helping them see the gray area, helping them generate more possible ways of viewing the situation and slowing their thinking down so that your fear brain is not always the one in control and jumping you to conclusions that you can only do X or Y, and that's it. You're stuck. And that really puts you in a bad place. So, Wendy, what do you find most helpful when you're working with people around helping sensitive strivers balance that thoughtfulness?
Yeah, one thing that we talked about the last session of Resilient, we talked about the thought of using curiosity during a meeting,
Mm.
um, rather than thinking about yourself and how you might, uh, show up the best that you can be, or being afraid of how people see you. Instead, come from a curious standpoint. So I think that it applies much more to, well, to more areas than just in a meeting. And by using curiosity, it can really open your mindset and
Mhm.
halt that overthinking.
Mm. Yeah, instead of, there's such a spotlight effect when you're overthinking where you think all of the attention is on you. Everyone's judging you. Everyone's going to say you're an idiot if you speak up and say something that you perceived was not fully thought out or informed. And the truth is people aren't paying as much attention to us as we think they are. And I think that tool of having curiosity helps us leverage more of our empathy, our empathetic approach of, I wonder what's going on for other people. How could I show up and serve them more? And it gets the spotlight off of you and focuses it more on others. So I love that. Um, is there anything else that, we were starting to get into this topic of how to interrupt overthinking, especially when it comes to speaking up in meetings, because that's a big area. We find that it holds people back. So,
Right.
what are your thoughts on that? How do we stop that cycle?
I think one of the most important things is actually outside of the meeting.
Mm.
So before the meeting, getting prepared, being prepared with your thoughts. Have a pre-meeting ritual where you do the Superman pose, or you think about, what is the importance of this meeting? Is it really as critical and scary as I'm making it out to be?
Mm.
Um, and it's a time where you can, and I love this one. You talk about this a lot, Melody, asking the facilitator to call on you during the meeting. So get in touch with whoever's facilitating the meeting ahead of the meeting, and ask them to call on you, since you may have a hard time speaking up yourself, and
Mhm.
you have something important to share.
Yes. I love that. Yeah, I call that the baton strategy. So that, yes, as Wendy said, you let the organizer know where you want to contribute so that when the time comes, they can pass the baton over to you. It holds you accountable for actually saying something, right? Um, and it gives you an in, so you don't have to fight to get your voice heard over other people. Fantastic. And I love the warm up ritual idea too. It's really great. Of course, anything can go too far, but having structure to help calm your nerves, to have almost like you were saying, like a pre-game ritual you take yourself through, um, it can be very grounding. Can be very grounding and really great for just regulating yourself before you walk into that environment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then there's during the meeting. Um, And again, that's where curiosity comes in.
Mhm.
Ask questions, seek to understand,
Mm.
um, try to speak up early, ask others for their thoughts and focus on them.
Mm.
And another great technique is using the yes and.
Mm.
So if you have something to contribute and someone else has said some point, you can kind of jump in there by going, yes, that's a great idea. And we could do this. So kind of build upon their idea. And it's a really good kind of a transition, and incorporating your ideas into the meeting itself.
Yes. Yeah. And remember, as we're going along now, please type in what is resonating with you, what's standing out to you, any questions you have. And Wendy, I just want to again piggyback on what you were saying, that idea of piggybacking on other people's comments with the yes and. What's at the core of that is taking the pressure off of yourself. That every time you speak up in a meeting, it doesn't have to be some groundbreaking, never before heard or articulated insight that is the standard so many of us hold ourselves to. It
Right.
can be asking a question, building on someone else's point. Those all add value in their own ways. So I love that. That's a great actionable suggestion of literally use the yes and language. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so another thing that we had talked about earlier, and I'm really curious to hear from you, is why is it so hard for sensitive strivers to disconnect from work?
Yeah.
Is just something that comes up a lot, and I think everybody here would love to hear that.
Yes. Yeah. I think now more than ever, we're hearing this because the pandemic has changed how we work. I would say the vast majority of us are either fully remote, we're in hybrid situations where we're going into the office a couple times a week, or maybe seeing our team once a month or a few times a quarter. And all of that means that there's less separations, there's less natural organic boundaries between work time and non work time. And so that means work can happen anytime. You're getting dinged about projects while you're at the dinner table, or you're trying to catch up on the weekends. And then add to that our programming as sensitive strivers, where we're always trying to anticipate situations. So we're always trying to stay on top of things, be a little bit ahead. We have fear of missing out on situations, which you were talking about before, how that can lead us to overcompensate and overwork. We have a sense of responsibility and a sense of duty that, again, strength taken to an extreme can go too far. And that sense of duty can lead us to overfunction, where we take on too much responsibility, we put in more effort than we should. And what's funny, I was having a conversation with someone who joined us inside of Resilient yesterday, and she was saying, I've gotten to this point in my career, and she's pretty senior in her organization. And she said, I've gotten to this point in my career, and I can't believe nobody ever teaches you how to set boundaries. Nobody ever teaches you how to say no, how to push back, how to, strategically navigate these situations. Yet, it's one of the most important skills you need to be successful, because we're all being asked to do more with less, yet we're never taught these skills. And so I actually did a live earlier this week about, how to disconnect from work in a healthy way. And some of the concepts I mentioned there was reframing rest as an investment, that it's also not a reward. Rest should not be seen as something you get for working hard enough. Yet that's what so many of us are taught and how we're conditioned. But rest should be seen as an investment and a prerequisite for your performance. That this is something I do to perform my best, not something I get because I performed well. I really want that to sink in for people, because that is a really tough mindset shift. It's very counterintuitive from our culture and what we're taught, but it's so crucial to even giving yourself permission to disconnect from work. The second concept I mentioned was starting slow. I know you've seen this inside of Resilient as well, where people will say, okay, that's it. I'm going to start setting boundaries. I'm going to start taking more time for myself. And all of a sudden, they're, trying to put aside 3 hours a day for their morning routine and fitness classes. And then they just backtrack, because that's such an impossible high bar to reach. So start slow, start very small, start with 2 5-minute breaks, and then build yourself up. Start by ending work at 10 p.m. and then a few weeks later, push it back to 9 p.m. Start slow, build your trust in yourself, and push up from there. Wendy, anything you wanted to add around disconnecting, that idea of disconnecting from work?
Yeah, and I want to keep going a little bit with the
Yeah.
thought of starting slow.
Yeah.
And another reason why it's important to start slow, other than, it's new for you and you might overdo it for yourself, is with boundaries. Like moving the time that you end work up and up an hour, every once in a while. It's the people. Work is expecting you to be working late, because that's what you've been doing. You've taught them how to treat you. And you've taught them that you don't disconnect from work. But you want to set this boundary, and you want to be able to disconnect from work. And you need to teach them that you are going to start doing that. So it's really important to not only start slow for yourself, but start slow for other people so that
Mhm.
it's not too disruptive for them. Not that you should live your life for other people, but it really helps to make things work better at work.
Such a great point. Such a great point. And I love what you said. One of the phrases we say all the time, which is you teach people how to treat you. You
Yeah.
teach people how to treat you. And I just want to read some of the takeaways so far. Joanne was saying she loves the suggestion of going into the meeting as curious instead of your brain being in scattered mode. Jessica was saying satisficing stuck with her and the idea of yes and. Um, and also, we have a lot of agreement on the idea of boundaries. Amazing. Amazing. Okay. Wendy, one of your areas of specialty, and what I love that you bring to the program, is a big focus on concepts like self compassion, self acceptance. And the question I have for you is what role does the idea of self forgiveness play when it comes to overthinking? Because I don't think many of us even think of that term, self forgiveness, when thinking about this topic. So, yeah, tell
Yeah.
us more.
Yeah. At first, it does seem very connected, but if you really think about it, by forgiving ourselves, we can release the weight of past mistakes and free ourselves to focus on positive growth and change in the present.
Mm,
So, for all those things that you're ruminating about, self forgiveness can help you move past that and move forward with the present.
mm,
It can also help you focus on your current reality,
mm,
identify what you've learned, build strategies to move forward, and let go of negative feelings such as guilt, shame, and self blame.
mm,
So, all of this overthinking is caused by, or it is hand in hand with negative thinking, anxiety.
mm,
So, by forgiving yourself, you can let go of that. And there are the 4 R's of forgiveness that I like to teach about. Um, they're an effective framework for practicing self forgiveness.
mm,
So, for the 4 R's, the first one is accepting responsibility.
mhm,
Forgiving yourself is about more than just putting the past behind you and moving on. It's
mm,
about accepting what's happened and showing compassion to yourself. If you've been making excuses, rationalizing, or justifying your actions in order to make them seem acceptable, it's time to face up to and accept what you've done.
mm,
The second step is expressing remorse.
mm,
And as a result of taking responsibility, you may experience a range of negative feelings, including guilt and shame. These feelings of guilt and remorse can serve as a springboard to positive behavior change. These feelings of, um, understand that making mistakes that you feel guilty about doesn't make you a bad person or undermine your intrinsic value. And then the third step, repair the damage and restore trust.
mm,
Making amends is an important part of forgiveness, even when the person you're forgiving is yourself. Just as you might not forgive someone else until they've made it up to you in some way, forgiving yourself is more likely to stick when you feel like you've earned it.
mm,
Fixing your mistakes means you'll never have to wonder if you could have done more.
mm,
And then the fourth step, focus on renewal. Giving yourself, forgiving yourself often requires finding a way to learn from the experience and grow as a person. And to do this, you need to understand why you behaved the way you did and why you feel guilty.
mm,
Evaluate what steps you can take to prevent the same behaviors again in the future. You might have messed up, but it was a learning experience that can help you make better choices in the future.
mm.
So, with those 4 R's of forgiveness, you can implement them to start letting go of those negative thoughts, those negative feelings, and stop overthinking.
Mm. And so they were responsibility,
Mhm,
remorse,
mhm. Repair the damage and restore trust.
repair and
Mhm.
restore, and then renewal.
Yep.
Yes. Love it. Love it. And I love the parallel between, think about how you would approach this with another person and then apply that to yourself.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
great. It's great. So Wendy, I want to be conscious of time. And is there any final messages you want to share, especially for anyone who's watching who may be on the fence about, is resilient right for me? Anything you want to share with someone who's in that situation?
Sure. Gosh, when I attended Resilient, I wasn't sure. Um, I had never been in a group program before, and had not a ton of experience with coaches. Um, but it was a really, I mean, it was really compelling to be able to go in depth and resolve some of these things that have been going on in my life forever, it seemed. And um, I wouldn't have given it up for anything. I have remained friends with every single person in the group. I have, gosh, talked to so many people about, you should do this, you should do this. And I keep saying it because it's so true. And now I'm a coach. So I'm not just saying this now because I'm a coach. Um, in resilient, but from all of my experience from years ago, several years now, just I've never forgotten, and it's not something I'll ever forget. I feel so much more balanced and in charge of my life.
Mm. Yes, I love it. And, that means the world to hear. And again, to have you as a coach in the program now, it's such a beautiful full circle moment. And I think what makes Resilient really special is the combination of we have a curriculum that is not just theory, it's practical, it's actionable because we want to give you tools you can actually use in your day-to-day life and work. That's what we care about, is you getting results. So we have our curriculum that's also designed for you as a sensitive striver in mind, that this is not just, I'm sure so many of us have come across generic career, leadership, management, work advice, and it doesn't quite work for our personality.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
everything in this program is tailored for that. But then you add to that the coaching. So we have 2 live calls every week. Monday, we have live office hours where you can come, you can get coaching on specific challenges you are facing. And myself and Wendy are there to give you direction on that and give you input and help you create a action plan for yourself. And then on Thursdays, we have our 90-minute group calls. And that's where really a lot of the magic happens, where we're going deeper on the lessons from that week. We're doing knowledge sharing, a little bit of coaching, connecting with one another. Um, and then last is the community aspect. So on a practical level, we have a private community space where everyone can connect and chat with one another. But as you were saying, the bonds and friendships and support and brain trust, having those people who get you perhaps for the first time in your life, that is really transformational. So this is not just a
Mhm.
program where you sign up and then you're just kind of left to your own devices. We and the rest of the folks in your cohort are there with you along the way. And we have a big focus on insight, implementation, and action. So, what are your top takeaways from today? Go ahead, type in the chat. We would love to hear what stood out to you from this conversation, what you're going to apply in your own life. And we want to invite you to join us inside of Resilient. As I said at the top here, the program kicks off. Our last round for 2023 kicks off on Thursday, and enrollment closes tonight. Enrollment closes tonight. So if you are on the fence, if you are at all interested, we have a few spots left. And the QR code is here on the screen. Again, you can open your phone, go to your camera app. It will bring you a link right to the page, or you can head to melodywilding.com/resilient. So if you want to end this year stronger than you started it, if you want many, many, many more practical tools, more in-depth strategies for overcoming overthinking, for reclaiming your confidence at work, being more assertive, being able to speak up, communicate concisely, set boundaries, move past imposter syndrome, then Resilient is the place for you. So Teresa was saying satisficing. Jason said definitely the 4 R's for forgiveness. That's great. So glad to hear it. So Wendy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Melody. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, this was fun.
Yes, amazing, amazing. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. You can catch this on replay if you just want to come back to this page. The replay will be here for you, but hopefully we'll see many of you inside of Resilient. All right, take care, everybody.